episode 22 of LogiCast, the AWS News podcast brought to you by Logicata. I'm Karl Robinson, CEO and co-founder of Logicata, and I'm joined today by my colleague, John, as always. Goodall. How are you doing today, John?
I'm going to put that on my birth certificate. John, as always, Goodall. That's now my name.
I think it's, as always, has become your middle name or middle names. So I shall, from here on in, refer to you as that. But we're also joined today by yet another very special guest, Armielyn Obinguar from the Philippines. How are you doing today, Armielyn?
Yeah, definitely doing great. Yeah, thank you so much for this invitation to be here.
You're welcome. Tell us a bit about yourself, Armielyn, about what you do for a living, etc.
Oh, yeah. All right. So I'm Armielyn. Yeah, I'm from the Philippines, and I'm also an AWS community builder under the data category. And I'm also working in a space of ML and AI. So definitely something related to those GPT coming in. Yeah, we're really working on right now. Aside from that, I'm also trying to co-found a non-profit organization that's more like pushing forward the responsible AI. So that's definitely what I do aside from events and probably like research about ML. So yeah,
Sounds good. So you're at the bleeding edge with generative AI and all of
yeah.
that, those buzzwords that are out there in the industry right now. Unfortunately, I don't think we've got anything in our news selection about that today, but maybe we can have a slight segue into some generative AI or something as the conversation pans out. So anyway, if you're a regular listener to the podcast, you'll know that once a week I collate and circulate an AWS News Roundup newsletter where I scour the web for news about AWS. And then once a week in the podcast, we select a subset of the articles from the News Roundup that we'd like to talk about in more detail. So we've got 5 such articles this week that we'd like to talk about. And the first one is from our friends at The Register. Not one of their most controversial headlines, I have to say, but interesting nonetheless. This article is entitled AWS Teases Mysterious Mil-spec Snowblade Server. So we seem to be hearing lots about the Snow family recently. I'm sure we've spoken about snowballs and snowball edges and things quite a bit on recent episodes of the podcast. But now we're hearing about the Snowblade. So what can you tell me about the Snowblade, John?
I think you're right. I think this is the third podcast in a row we've had a snow something. So don't know what's going on there.
And it's springtime. It's not even winter. So lots of snow in springtime, which is very unusual. Yeah.
I mean, this is England. It did snow in April once. But yeah, on message. We're not weather forecasters. So this is an interesting one. As you say, it's not a controversial headline, which is a bit weird for LReg, but I think this has come from one of their many spies in one of the networks because they seem to have lots of them. Yes, okay, this is an announcement, and they haven't really been able to get lots of detail about it because it's talking about military hardware and not in the form that will get you banned on various social media. This is actual hardware that the military uses for computing. Cool. That's that. Fighter jet in the corner, neatly sidestepped. This does look quite cool. They're calling it a Snowblade, which is weird because it's kind of like a blade form factor, but it's only a half a rack wide. So again, if you haven't read the article, for the listeners, it's talking about a snowball type device that sits in a 5U blade chassis in a rack. So in theory, you could get 2 of them in a 5U space. You can get 2 of them next to each other with 208 vCPUs and as much RAM as you can shake a really big stick at. And the idea being it will run, things that Snowball devices run. It'll run EC2, IAM, CloudTrail, Greengrass, blah, 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 in what they refer to as constrained environments, be that power, network, what have you, so that they can run these ridiculous compute workloads in the middle of a desert somewhere where no one officially is, but there's a base somewhere. I think that's kind of the purpose of this. It's quite interesting. Just as a piece of hardware, the fact that it's gone military first kind of makes sense. It's where the money is, particularly in the States. But I'd like to see this sort of thing coming down into civilian land where you can put it on like an oil rig, because that would be really cool.
What are your thoughts on this one, Armielyn? Anything to add?
Yeah, I think it's actually an interesting article, and I see that the more we scale, possible the innovations that we have in the technology space, And the way this kind of like a new thing, especially in the AWS side. So I guess for the listeners, they would still have to, keep themselves updated for this one, because me myself have, first time heard this, and then I got my mind blown up. And I probably think it just would be like how this gonna be working, especially when people are gonna use it for their own, business sides or a lot of things. So yeah, I think that's something that probably people will look forward, and I guess the best practices to actually use this, certain one. So yeah, it's definitely what I thought of.
And I noticed that you can run SageMaker on it, so you could be doing some machine learning and AI in the
Yeah,
desert or
yeah,
wherever it is that you happen to be in
yeah, yeah,
battle, I guess. I just hope it works over satellite internet, because I can't imagine there's going to be much broadband in these
yeah,
war
yeah.
zones. But yeah, it's definitely one of those things that the more you know about it, the more likely you are to be killed, I think, because I did try poking around
I
myself on
think you've
the
just got us banned
Amazon
now.
website.
Well done.
From where?
I think the YouTube doesn't like that word. I think you've got us banned.
Oh, the K word.
Yes.
Oh, not Karl. Yeah, okay. Well, maybe I'll just get auto bleeped and hopefully not banned. But we do distribute on other channels other than YouTube. But no, it is really interesting. And like you said, John, and like the article says, military first. But it'd be interesting to see what other applications there might be for this. You mentioned oil rigs, but I guess other exploration sites and archaeological digs and that kind of thing, could all potentially make use of this technology. So really good to see this kind of edge computing family growing. So anyway, let's move on to the next article we've got this week, which is an article on the AWS storage blog, which is about reducing AWS Key Management Service costs by up to 99% with S3 bucket keys. Now, I don't think this is anything particularly new, although the blog post is relatively new. So it's just highlighting some features that are already available within S3. But John, tell us a bit more about how people could potentially reduce their AWS key management costs with S3 bucket keys.
Yeah, sure. This one's a bit more terrestrial than the last article, but also a bit more concrete because the other one was a bit speculative. So this is a lot more important now than it used to be, because it used to be that you didn't have to encrypt S3. Right now, S3 buckets are encrypted from day one by default using either S3, SSE S3 or SSE KMS. I'm using the acronyms in case anyone's studying for their test. Those are the correct acronyms. However, if you're using a KMS key, or to be honest, even an S3 provided key, but realistically a KMS key, there are costs for going out to KMS and retrieving the key so that you can then decrypt things, right? Yes, it caches a little bit, but realistically, it's one request per thing that you want to go and get, be that a file, a folder, a lot of folders, whatever. It's kind of one request per. Now, that's not cheap. That's quite cheap on a one-to-one basis. So if you're just doing one file, you're not going to notice. But if you're pulling 10,000, 100,000, a million files out of an S3 bucket, which you may very well be doing, those costs will start to get very expensive very quickly, because you'll exhaust any free tiers that are there. I don't think there is any. And you will start to notice these charges at scale. Right. What are S3 bucket keys and how does that help? S3 bucket keys are basically caching the key locally, so that when I say locally, it means kind of within the S3 service. It's not like on your laptop. So locally here means locally to the bucket. So what that basically means is that a time limited key is generated by KMS and S3 uses that. Rather than going all the way off to KMS to get the key to come back again, you get like a temporary key generated from the original key, and it means that you're not going out to KMS anywhere near as much, and you're still getting all the same security benefits, because this local key is time limited and it expires after a while. That's why it's saving 99%, because it's, you're still going to KMS occasionally. There's a few services that there's a few things you need to enable in the bucket policy. So it's bucket policy or the IAM policy? IAM policy. So that key can work with kind of the bucket and all that kind of thing. But realistically, if you're creating the bucket through the console, there's a little checkbox that says enable bucket keys. You hit that and it does it all for you. Obviously, we encourage people to use Terraform and CloudFormation and infrastructure as code in whatever format that might be. So you just need to be aware that you need to enable those permissions, otherwise it will just start breaking. You get these weird, annoying error messages. There's a couple of other bits as well that you can do, again, in the article, so that you can force things to go through that process through things like bucket policies and stuff. So you can deny that aren't SSE KMS, which just enforces the encryption at another level. And it kind of tells you how to go about doing all of that, and doing it in a multi-tenancy environment where you've got lots of different customers with their own keys and all that kind of thing, because it's not simple, but generally worth doing, absolutely worth doing, because these charges could get quite expensive quite quickly at scale.
What are your thoughts on this, Armielyn? Anything to add there?
Yeah, I think I think John covered it all. But I guess for the people probably using it for like multiple projects, especially in organization, I guess managing the cost would really be the important thing. Like for example, when we like handle a lot of probably like data working in it, it's definitely one of the like probably the problem. But now that we see this another like feature is being added and simply like you can now monitor everything like could save more. So I think in this weekly news probably like those people are like trying to optimize everything for their scalability, so it's probably like something to look forward.
Cool. So yeah, cost optimization is a huge, or cloud optimization in general is a huge area of focus at the moment, getting a lot of coverage in the press, which is a neat segue into our next article, which is an article on InfoWorld about what's missing in your cloud optimization projects. Now, before we get into this one, I had to say I read it and I thought it was all fairly basic stuff. Just kind of bread and butter stuff. But sometimes it's good, I guess, to go back to basics and remind ourselves that there are potentially some very simple things that we ought to be looking at from an optimization perspective, just to keep those costs under control. So given that John covered everything last time, Armielyn, I'm going to let you go first this time. Give you an opportunity to talk to this article and hear some more of your thoughts around cloud optimization.
Yeah, I think this also like speaks on my experience as well. Like whenever we work on a projects, it's simply like the only question that we always ask at the end is like how can we optimize it? And now that this article really showed like okay, we need to always optimize everything, especially now that we have this a lot of developments and also in the space of generative AI. We have to make sure that everything is like algorithm, the costs and all. So I guess maybe maybe like related to this, I guess it's more like if you're gonna develop something in the cloud, especially in the AWS, always make sure to prioritize the optimization, which is something that offers with AWS features and all. And I think this is only the priority right now since a lot of innovations and technology are coming up forward. So yeah.
And what are your thoughts, John? Do you want to cover the basics here?
Yeah, I think as professionals, as people with various certifications and have been doing this for X number of years, we can quite often forget that there are people out there that don't have that level of experience. I keep tripping over my words today. Don't know what's going on. It's the heat. It's definitely the heat. So yeah, we can quite easily forget that there are people out there that are new to cloud. I mean, you and I try to go to local events and help people with that sort of thing, Karl. But yeah, there are a lot of people out there that are still new to this, even though it's been around for 10 odd years now. And it's important, I think, to keep restating the basics, because every day there's going to be someone that's not come across it before. So you can quite rightly say it's a very basic article, and it is, because it's talking about auto scaling, it's talking about right sizing, it's talking about reserved instances and savings plans and spot instances, and picking the right storage mechanism, be that EBS or EFS or S3. And the article itself actually says this at the bottom. I'm going to quote it verbatim here. It's, none of these are earth-shattering suggestions. They are fairly simple ones that can be leveraged now and are proven to bring value. And that's absolutely spot on. They are. Sort your auto scaling, sort your reservations out, sort your storage patterns out, and you can probably take a good third off of your bill overall. And we see this as a business time and time again with our customers, where we'll go and do a FinOps piece of work for them, be that as part of the managed service or as a separate engagement, and it'll be reservations, unused volumes, Why are you using EFS where you could be using EBS? Is there a reason for this? Lots of snapshots that you aren't cleaning up, so on and so on and so on. And at the end of the day, everyone just likes having money rather than giving it to somebody else where you don't need to. So absolutely worth restating the basics again.
Yeah, I think it talks to a lot of the low-hanging fruit, but it's not, as you say, this is something we're doing day in, day out for our customers, but it's a moving feast. The opportunities for optimization are changing all the time. So whereas 3 or 4 years ago, the primary purchase plans were all around reserved instances, now, of course, AWS are pushing things much more like compute savings plans and EC2 savings plans, etc. So it's understanding all of that and what's best for your particular use case. Of course, you've also got things like Graviton CPUs that AWS are pushing their own custom manufactured silicon, which gives a much better price performance ratio than Intel based silicon. So there's lots of opportunities to move over to Graviton based either EC2 instances or other PaaS services like RDS, Lambda, etc., running on Graviton to optimize costs that way. So it is a moving feast. So whilst this article does kind of pick off some of the more what we might think of as some of the more obvious low-hanging fruit, there's lots of other optimization opportunities in there as well, which are changing on a fairly regular basis as things tend to do with AWS. I mean, how is this in the world of kind of data and machine learning, Armielyn? What are the sort of optimization opportunities there? Are they any different? Are they the same? What do you tend to find in the projects you're involved in?
Yeah, I think it always depends on how, like, what's the use case. So that's why you mentioned it. So that's when every time we work on a lot of use cases, it always depends on how large your data would be when you put it into the cloud, and what the customer would be expecting to see, especially in the side of optimization. And sometimes we do handle, like, probably, like, the costs also. So I think it depends on what you want to try to deliver for your clients, and then what they could offer as well in terms of the costs and all the stuff like in AWS. But now that we see that this is one of the priority of AWS to always keep it updated, especially now that it's everything is moving forward inside of the machine learning and in the data world. So it's definitely one.
Yeah, I think one of the key things with data is selecting the right storage platform and the right storage tier. I think we've spoken about this before on the podcast, but particularly with things like S3, we spoke about S3 in the previous article. And obviously there are lots of different tiers of S3. What you tend to find is most people have just put all of their data on the standard tier, which is, of course, the most expensive. But if the data is not being accessed regularly, then that's not the most cost-effective place for it to be. Lots of optimization opportunities around storage as well. In fact, I was just doing some monthly service reports for some of our customers today, and I noticed that in AWS backup that some customers had backups which are set to never be archived to cold storage, and I thought, perhaps there's an optimization opportunity there. Maybe some of those backups should be going to cold storage if they're going to be looked at. So, lots of little tips and tricks. Some low-hanging fruit, which are going to generate huge savings, like John said, up to a third off your cloud bill. Once you've done that, then a lot of the other optimization opportunities are going to generate much lower savings. But look after the pennies and the pounds will look after themselves, as we say in the UK. I'm sure there are similar sayings about dollars or Philippine pesos or whatever currency you might choose to pay for your cloud in. But those small marginal gains do all add up over time. So let's move on from the world of cloud optimization and into the world of cloud training. So we've got an article from the AWS Training and Certification blog, which has got quite a long title. So let's see if I can get this one out without tripping over myself. This article is entitled 10 Tips to Prepare Simultaneously for AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner and AWS Certified Solutions Architect Associate exams. So, of course, Cloud Practitioner and Solutions Architect Associate often are the first two sort of proper certifications that many AWS practitioners will go for. Cloud Practitioner is a more kind of generic for anybody involved in cloud. It's not particularly technical, although it does touch on some technical aspects of cloud, but it looks a lot at cloud economics, the business case for cloud, and that kind of thing. And then, of course, Solutions Architect Associate does go a little bit more into the tech. It doesn't go particularly deep, but it covers off a lot of the kind of core infrastructure services like EC2, RDS, basics around DNS, networking, putting VPC networks together, etc. So often people will start with Cloud Practitioner and then move on to Solutions Architect Associate next. Certainly that was the path that I took on my AWS certification journey. But this one talking about doing them both together. So Armielyn, I'm not sure where you're at on your certification journey. Have you done these, the Cloud Practitioner and Solutions Architect Associate?
Yeah. And I think it's nice that, it's the recommended to start off, especially for those people who would be using AWS. So I probably would say that, a lot of, reading on the documentation side, especially when you're trying to, review all the stuff and, take this certification. So probably if you can read as much as possible, those documentation, that will really helpful. And if you know the product itself, like for example, you've been using, AWS, and then you know the features and all, a lot of it, I think it would be a plus, especially those who are gonna be taking this practitioner and also the solution architect. It would be easy if you have this experience, but if not, then it would be better to use it the time to give like a hands-on experience on how to use it, especially those features. It will cover it on probably on the certification exam as well. And if you can probably like read as much as like those frequently asked questions, I this is also my one thing that will be useful for me, like when I read articles, a lot of like for example this one, the AWS news and stuff. So this is also one of the things that you could do aside from having it both. And I think another one is to make sure that you always keep yourself ready to a lot of concepts, especially for the first timers gonna taking this. So expect a lot of technical stuff, but if you get the hands-on, that would be probably easy for you, and if you want to take the both. But I would suggest to start off with the cloud practitioner, just to give general idea about everything in the AWS side, and then if you are like good enough with it, then just go to the solution architect, so not to get overwhelmed with this thing. So that's probably my tip for those people who would be trying it out. Yeah.
Before we ask John for his opinion, I was
Mhm.
not sure if it was last week that we discussed this, John, but I'm going to ask Armielyn on her preference. Do you prefer to go to a testing center or do the exams at home?
I think I would love to do the testing center because sometimes our internet is kind of like, I think it depends on the location of the person. So if you're located to like a little bit, the internet is kind of, on and off. So maybe take the on-site. But if you prefer like, okay, you have like good connection, everything is set up, no distractions or all, you can do so these online way to exam, but it always depends on your preferences. But you should always depend on that because sometimes if your internet connection is kind of bit on and off, that would probably like makes it more complicated to take the exam. But yeah, I think that's definitely one. Here in the Philippines, when you do like the on-site, it's very strict. So expect that you have to be prepared. Everything is like the documents that you need to pass on, what you bring should always be with you because that's also the blocker. So make sure to prepare everything before your examination so that everything goes well. So I think that's something that people should expect. So yeah.
Sure. And so, John, I know you've done both of these.
Hmm.
Or
Actually, not in that
no,
order. I have.
yeah.
I didn't do them in this order though. I
Mm.
did the Solutions Architect Associate years ago now, and it's expired, and I don't hold it anymore. And then I did the Dev Associate 6 months back, and then I did CCP. I think just because I think we needed it for partner levels or some such. So I just kind of went, okay, I've been doing it. I'll just go do the exam because it's not a humble brag. It's I can just walk in and pass the test. It's because I've been doing this for a long time. But yes, I have passed both of these. It's interesting that they say these two at the same time. It does make sense because they're quite similar exams. Solutions architect is definitely harder because it's the associate level, not the foundation level, as AWS referred to them. But I don't remember anything from my CCP that would have felt out of place on the associate exam. Easier, sure, simpler question, fine, but topic wise, I don't remember anything that I'd have felt was that's really weird. Why is this on it? No, it kind of it made sense. So if you're going to do two exams at the same time, this is quite a good kind of pair to do. The other thing I wanted to call out from this one, shout out Zarina, by the way, is because we were at that event a few months ago now, and one of our other CB colleagues was talking about exams and certification pathways and all the rest of it. And the CCP is a good exam to take as a confidence builder, because it's something that if you're 80% of the way through the training for the solutions architect, you could probably do quite well with the CCP. So it's good for a confidence builder as well.
So I'm just going to go through some of the tips. Download the exam guides. Is that something you guys have done? Do you read the exam guides, or do you just kind of jump straight in?
I haven't. I will, again, off the back of that meetup that we were at a couple of months ago now, because I didn't realize that not all the questions were marked, because it's a 65 question test and only 50 of them were worth any points. I didn't know that, but that's in the guide. I just never bothered to read it.
The problem is you don't know which ones they are.
No,
so.
No.
Yeah. So sign up for AWS Skill Builder. I think that's a good tip because there is a lot of free training. There's also a lot of paid training out there that you can go for. Some of it costs very little, but the AWS Skill Builder library is, being updated on a regular basis. So you probably find most things in there free of charge that you need to pass the course. What training did you use, Armielyn, to get your certs?
I think I actually started with Cloud Academy. This is one we really recommend here, especially for those who feel like they really don't know like how to get started in AWS. So you can also sign up as well on in parallel to this the skill builders. You can have both if you wanted to really master everything about this, the general and all the stuff, the foundations. Definitely take the both. And I guess one good thing about the Cloud Academy is that it has this work. You can try it. Like for example, this hands-on experience as well. Like you can get like okay, how to set this up. Then there's like guide. So I guess that really works for people who are like transitioning to using AWS or like cloud services, specifically AWS. So that's one thing that you can use for. I think exam guide, I really don't usually use it like most of the time because sometimes the guide doesn't have the questions in some exams. So yeah, you gotta experience it first so that you get the confidence that you can really nail those certification. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Hands-on experience is important. Really helped me to understand how everything fits together. And then you mentioned questions there, but that was the other tip I wanted to kind of highlight from this was complete free sample questions, or there are other sources of paid sample questions. But sample questions are a really great way to understand what you're going to get when you sit down for that exam, what the structure of the question is, what the structure of the answers are, because it's important to understand how that works, because that can really give you a strong head start in the exam. So having said that, and I think I've said this before, certainly for some of my associate and professional level certifications, I never passed a sample test. I always failed them, but I've never failed an actual exam. So I think, don't be disheartened if you're not passing the sample tests, because actually I think they're harder, and perhaps also you don't focus on them as much because you're not actually in exam conditions. But I never managed to achieve the pass mark on a sample test, but I've never failed a real one. So
yeah, I clocked that the other day, actually. I realized I was trying to pass the DevOps Pro practice tests in about 30 or 40 minutes when it's a 3-hour exam. So it's like,
Yeah.
okay. Oh, okay, right then.
You're not giving it the time. You're
No.
not giving it the time it deserves. Whereas if you've driven to a test center and you know you're going to be there for 3 hours, you're going to focus purely on that. You've got no distractions. There's no phone there. There's no second screen or anything like that. So yeah, definitely different when you're in exam conditions. Anyway, conscious of time, just let's touch on our last article, which is also about training. And this one, again, from the AWS Training and Certification blog, is about building your serverless knowledge and earning digital badges. So lots of digital badges available in the AWS Training arena. Now, these are not quite as, they don't hold quite as much weight, I guess, as a proper AWS certification, but still badges that can be displayed to demonstrate your learning nonetheless. So what are your thoughts on these, John?
I didn't really want to talk about the badges so much because my opinion is very much the same as yours. It's okay, it's a proof that you've done this, but it's probably not the same as a full-on exam. It's definitely nice to see that AWS are drawing attention specifically to serverless training, and they do talk about the Certified Developer Associate certification, and that's got a relatively high serverless content. About 30% of the exam is about serverless services. But what I would like to see, that's why I picked this, because I wanted to say this, is I would like to see a serverless specialty exam. Maybe there's one coming down the pipe, maybe not, don't know. But in the same way that there's AI/ML, database, security, networking, I'd like to see a serverless specialty exam come down the pipe too.
Yeah, fair enough. What about yourself, Armielyn? Have you done any of these digital badges outside of the kind of main certifications?
Yeah, I think it's also good, especially for people like, starting out. I guess digital badges really, gave a confidence for them. But I really suggest to really study different, serverless architecture. Don't just rely on, the idea that you get this digital badge and that you don't get the hands-on experience. So it's better to, yes, have this digital badge, still continue having this, knowledge on the actual, since I guess it's pretty covered as well on the certification, that a lot of serverless topics, and kind of sometimes it doesn't cover everything on the digital badges. So I think it would be better to be prepared for that. But I guess it's also one that people want to showcase that they started to finish this one, and so they can give. It's kind of like a game where you can just go level one and then go here, and then you might notice that, okay, I gotta go to the certification and getting more the knowledge itself. But yeah, I think it's nice for those first timers, I think. But for those who are like experienced ready, I think you would go directly to the certification without having this digital badges. So yeah, it's definitely after it. Yeah.
Yeah, I must confess, I've never done any of the digital badges myself, but I can see how it could be a nice confidence booster if you've never done an exam, never done a certification, and want to work towards it. So, yeah, could potentially be a good place to start. But this is also a good place to finish because we've reached the end of our time. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you again for joining us today, Armielyn, all the way from the Philippines. It's been really great to have you on and hear your opinions on these articles. And thanks again, John, as always, good all. I'm sure you'll be back again for more next week. So that was season 2, episode 22 of LogiCast. You can find us on all major podcast distribution platforms. iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, YouTube, etc.
Maybe YouTube.
Oh, it should be on YouTube. Well, yeah, maybe not. Maybe I'm going to get filtered. But hopefully you'll find us on all of the others. So thanks again for listening, and we will see you again next time.